twin suns of the Lyra system cast a gentle amber glow across the crystalline cities and verdant forests of Lyra Prime. It was a world of delicate beauty, a planet where art and science danced in harmonious tandem. The Lumari, avian-like, beings with feathers that shimmered in 1,000 hues, had carved a civilization of intricate sonic architecture and profound philosophical inquiry. Their cities were not built, but grown, resonating with melodies that shifted with the atmospheric currents and the mood of their inhabitants. For millennia, Lyra Prime had known only peace, its name a byword for tranquility in the quiet arm of the galaxy it graced. Elder Thelen, his once vibrant plumage now muted with age and worry, stood on the precipice of the Grand Resonarium, the heart of their capital, Ethelgard. Below him, the crystalline structures that normally pulsed with soft light and harmonious chimes were fractured, some dark, others emitting discordant screeches like wounded animals. Smoke, acrid and alien, coiled into the usually pristine sky, a stark violation of Lyra Prime's serenity. The Kryll Hegemony had arrived 3 solar cycles ago. They had not hailed. They had not offered terms. They had simply appeared, a swarm of brutal obsidian warships that blotted out the stars, their forms an affront to the Lumari's aesthetic sensibilities. The Kryll, insectoid and encased in thick chitinous armor, were a plague of locusts upon the galactic stage, consuming resources, enslaving populations, and leaving ruin in their wake. Their reputation had reached even the insulated Lumari, but it had always been a distant horror, a tale whispered from traders who had skirted the dark edges of Kryll territory. Now, that horror was immediate, visceral. Warlord Skarn, the architect of this particular conquest, observed the unfolding subjugation from the command deck of his flagship, the Ravager. His multifaceted eyes registered the explosions on the planet's surface with cold satisfaction. The Lumari's defenses, intricate energy lattices designed more to deter stellar radiation than to repel a dedicated warfleet, had folded like paper sculptures in a storm. Pitiful. He had allocated a mere fraction of his force to orbital bombardment, the rest holding in a disciplined, menacing orbit, a fist clenched around Lyra Prime's throat. Status of planetary resistance, Subcommander. Vrock? Skarn's voice was a dry rasp like stones grinding together. Negligible, Warlord, Vrock reported, his mandibles clicking. Their energy grid is shattered. Ground settlements are offering sporadic, uncoordinated defiance, easily contained. We project full planetary pacification within 1 more cycle. Excellent, Skarn rumbled. Lyra Prime was rich in certain rare minerals his hegemony craved for their war machine. The Lumari themselves, once broken, would serve as labor. Their delicate forms were ill-suited to hard work, but fear was a potent motivator. Those who didn't break would serve as examples. Down on the surface, Elder Thelen felt the tremors as another Kryll bombardment rocked Ethelgard. The beautiful resonant spires, painstakingly grown over generations, were crumbling. The songs of his people, the very essence of their culture, were being silenced, replaced by the shriek of incoming ordnance and the cries of the dying. He had dispatched envoys, broadcast pleas for parley in every conceivable galactic standard language. Each attempt had been met with silence or worse, targeted strikes on the transmission arrays. The Lumari were not warriors. Their history was devoid of the brutal conflicts that had shaped so many other species, including, though Thelen didn't know it, the distant humans. Their philosophy was built on harmony, understanding, and the pursuit of beauty. Against the Kryll's unyielding aggression, these tenets were as fragile as spun glass. He turned to his 2 remaining acolytes, their young faces streaked with dust and despair. The Archive of Echoes, he said, his voice barely a whisper but firm with resolve. We must activate the deep chanter. One acolyte, Lyria, gasped. Elder, the deep chanter hasn't been used in eons. It draws so much power, and its frequencies are archaic. Archaic means widespread, child, Thelen corrected gently, though his heart was heavy. It means it might reach those who listen on channels long forgotten by the grander powers. The galactic conquered will wring their manipulative appendages and debate our plight until we are dust. We need something else. Someone else. The archive of echoes was deep beneath the resonarium, shielded from all but a direct planetary core strike. It housed not just their cultural records but also the deep chanter, a relic from a more primitive age, a device designed to send a signal of last resort, a desperate cry into the cosmic wilderness. Its power requirements were immense, and its signal was raw, unfiltered, lacking the sophisticated encoding of modern distress calls. It was, in essence, a scream. They made their way through shattered corridors, the air thick with the smell of ozone and burning crystal. Thalen clutched a small, intricately carved data shard containing the essence of the Lumari, their history, their art, their plea. If this was to be their end, perhaps some distant, unknown species might at least know who they had been. Reaching the central chamber, they found the deep chanter surprisingly intact, a colossal assembly of resonating crystals and ancient power conduits. With trembling claws, Thalen and his acolytes began the activation sequence. Power was diverted from the city's failing emergency systems, causing the few remaining lights in their sector to flicker and die. The great crystals of the chanter began to hum, a sound that vibrated deep within their bones, a forgotten song of ultimate desperation. Aim it towards the unseen reaches, Thalen instructed, indicating a sector of space relatively unexplored by the major galactic powers, a region considered empty or populated by primitive, uninteresting civilizations. If there is any unexpected kindness, any unconventional strength out there, may our song find it. As the deep chanter reached its full power, a wave of raw sonic energy, encoded with the Lumari's desperate plea and a condensed packet of their identity, erupted from Lyra Prime. It tore through the Kryll's jamming fields by sheer brute force of its archaic wideband nature, a chaotic burst that their sophisticated systems initially struggled to categorize. On the Ravager, Sub-Commander Vrock frowned. Warlord, a massive, undirected energy burst from the planet's surface, unidentified signature, primitive, almost emotional in its structure. Skarn spared it a passing thought. A death cry. Let them sing their sorrow to the void. It will change nothing. He turned his attention back to the holographic display of Lyra Prime, already envisioning the mines and slave pens. The dying song of Lyra Prime was, to him, merely the overture to another successful conquest. He had no idea that this particular song, raw and desperate, was already traveling faster than light, a tiny seed of improbability cast into the infinite darkness. The deep chanter's cry, a wave of pure despair encoded with the Lumari's plight, rippled outwards from Lyra Prime. It was a complex signal, layered with the sorrow of a dying world, the terror of a gentle people facing annihilation, and a sliver of hope so faint it was almost indistinguishable from the background radiation of the cosmos. In the opulent chambers of the galactic conquered, a bloated assembly of established elder races, the signal registered as a minor anomaly. Analyst Xylos, a gelatinous being from the Cygnian cluster, whose species communicated through subtle bioluminescent pulses, noted the energy spike originating from the Lyra system. Xylos cross-referenced it. Kryll Hegemony incursion, previously logged. Lumari species, sentient avian category Gamma 7, minimal strategic or economic value. Xylos made a notation. Increased energy signature consistent with widespread destruction. Kryll exceeding standard subjugation protocols. Recommend formal censure motion at next conquered session. The next session was 3 decacycles away. No immediate action was deemed necessary. Lyra Prime was regrettably distant, and Kryll aggression, while distasteful, was a recurring, localized phenomenon. Similar scenes played out across other listening posts of the galaxy's civilized powers. Data was logged, reports were filed, and a collective shrug rippled through the established bureaucratic channels. The Lumari were too small, too far, too insignificant in the grand, cold calculus of galactic power. But the deep chanter's song, in its archaic rawness, also reached ears less jaded, less encumbered by ancient protocols. It slipped through the cracks of refined sensor nets, a whisper in the dark. Deep within the Veil Nebula, a turbulent expanse of cosmic dust and newborn stars that most species avoided, the United Terran Federation cruiser UTF Harbinger glided, silently. She was a ghost in the starlight, her hull plating a matte black that drank light, her experimental engines leaving an almost undetectable FTL wake. This was her shakedown cruise, a long-range patrol designed to test her novel systems, far from prying eyes and established space lanes. On the dimly lit bridge, Lieutenant Commander Lena Petrova, her face illuminated by the soft glow of her xenolinguistics and long-range communications console, frowned, her brow furrowed in concentration as she isolated a faint, incredibly distorted signal buried deep within the nebula's interference. Most automated systems would have filtered it out as noise, a mere echo of some distant stellar event. But Petrova, whose doctoral thesis had been on fragmented pre-FTL communication patterns of extinct civilizations, had a feel for such things. "Captain," she said, her voice calm but with an underlying current of urgency that made Thorne look up from his own command interface. "I'm picking up something unusual, highly degraded, wideband, multi-layered. It's not natural interference." Captain Aris Thorne, a man whose stillness often belied the keen intellect working beneath, swiveled his chair slightly. His gray eyes, usually thoughtful, sharpened. "Origin? Difficult to pinpoint precisely due to the distortion, sir, but it's coming from the direction of the Cetus arm, well outside Federation territory. The signal structure, it's archaic, almost primal, but there are definite linguistic markers embedded, sophisticated ones in fact. It's heavily masked by what sounds like intense emotional distress." Petrova's fingers flew across her console, filters engaging, algorithms running. "There's a core data packet, heavily compressed. Trying to unpack it now." Commander Jax Volkov, the Harbinger's tactical officer, leaned over from his station, his expression skeptical. "Probably just some pre-FTL species having a bad day with an asteroid, Lena, or pirates squabbling over scrap." Volkov was a man who saw threats first and asked questions later, a useful counterpoint to Petrova's more analytical nature. "No, this is different, Jax," Petrova insisted, her gaze fixed on the cascading data streams. "The energy signature of the carrier wave is immense, far beyond what a pre-FTL could generate. And the emotional resonance, I've rarely encountered anything like it. It feels like a scream." A hush fell over the bridge. Thorne watched, Petrova trusting her expertise. She was the best xenolinguist in the fleet, with an uncanny ability to discern meaning where others found only static. The Harbinger, with its advanced sensor suite, was designed to pick up whispers others missed. Finally, a coherent though heavily damaged fragment of the Lumari data packet resolved itself on Petrova's main display. It was a visual. A beautiful, elegant avian creature, its feathers iridescent, its large eyes filled with an intelligent, gentle light. Then the image flickered, overlaid with scenes of destruction, crystalline structures shattering, dark, brutalist ships filling the sky, and a fleeting, horrifying glimpse of an insectoid warrior. "Kryll," Volkov breathed, his earlier skepticism gone, replaced by a grim recognition. "That's Kryll Hegemony ordnance and ship configuration." Petrova nodded, her face pale. "The signal identifies the sending species as the Lumari. Location Lyra Prime. They're under full-scale attack by the Kryll. The core message is a plea for help, any help. It details systematic eradication." She swallowed hard. "They sent this on a wideband, high-power archaic frequency. A last resort." Thorne looked at the image of the Lumari, then at the fleeting depictions of their burning world. Lyra Prime. He knew the name vaguely. A minor independent system, noted for its unique artistic achievements in some obscure xenocultural database he'd once perused, not strategically vital to anyone except apparently the Kryll. And now, to the people living there. "Timestamp on the signal's origin?" Thorne asked, his voice quiet. Petrova ran the calculations. "Based on its degradation and our current position, it was sent approximately 72 standard hours ago, plus or minus 6. Sir, given Kryll operational doctrine against undefended targets, if no one has responded, She didn't need to finish the sentence. 72 hours, 3 days of unopposed Kryll brutality. Volkov swore under his breath. The Concord won't lift a finger for at least a month, if ever. Lyra Prime's a write-off for them. Thorne stared at the fading image of the Lumari. The Harbinger was on a shakedown, testing systems. Their orders were clear. Avoid engagement, observe, report. But there was also the unspoken mandate, the one rarely codified but deeply ingrained in the ethos of the Terran Federation fleet. You don't stand by and watch genocide if you have the means to act. The whispers from the dark had found a listener. The question was, what would that listener do? Captain Aris Thorne's gaze remained fixed on the image of the Lumari, their elegant forms starkly contrasted with the hellish backdrop of their burning world. The bridge of the UTF Harbinger was silent, save for the soft hum of its advanced systems, a silence that amplified the weight of the decision before them. Commander Volkov, status report on known Kryll fleet dispositions in the Cetus Arm, Thorne said, his voice breaking the stillness. Jax Volkov's fingers danced across his tactical console. The Kryll typically operate in conquest flotillas of 20 to 30 ships, centered around a warlord-class command carrier. Standard doctrine suggests the main force would remain in orbit to secure Lyra Prime, with smaller detachments possibly, raiding nearby systems, though Lyra appears to be relatively isolated. They're brutal but not strategically sophisticated. Overwhelm, occupy, exploit, rinse, and repeat. He paused. Sir, if we engage, we'll be facing a full flotilla. The Harbinger is potent, but she's one ship, and her primary systems are still considered experimental. Lieutenant Commander Petrova, Thorne turned to his communications officer. What's the likelihood of any other power responding to this distress call in a meaningful time frame? Lena Petrova shook her head, her expression grim. Minimal, Captain. As Commander Volkov stated, the Galactic Concord's response time for non-member strategically minor systems is unglacial. Privateer outfits or smaller polities wouldn't have the strength to confront a Kryll flotilla. The Lumari are effectively on their own, if they still exist. The last words hung heavy in the air. Thorne leaned back in his command chair, the worn synth leather creaking faintly. His orders for this shakedown cruise were explicit. Test the Harbinger's capabilities, avoid unnecessary contact, and under no circumstances engage a superior force or risk the ship's unique technologies falling into unknown hands. Intervening in a full-scale Kryll invasion was a flagrant violation of at least 2 of those directives. Sector Command would have his commission if he went in and things went sideways, if they even survived. Yet, the images Petrova had managed to pull from the Lumari's desperate scream resonated deeper than any regulation. He thought of Earth's own history, the dark ages when nations stood by while others burned, the slow awakening to the idea that silence in the face of atrocity was complicity. Humanity had learned that lesson in Blood and Fire. Had they traveled to the stars only to forget it? This ship, Thorne said, his voice quiet but firm, gesturing to the vessel around them, is the most advanced piece of hardware the Federation has ever produced. She's fast, she's powerful, and she's full of surprises. What's the point of all that, Commander Volkov, if not to make a difference when it truly counts? Volkov met his captain's gaze. The tactical officer, usually so quick with a pugnacious quip, was somber. Sir, I'm not arguing against action, I'm just outlining the stakes. If we go in hard. No half measures. The Kryll respect nothing but overwhelming force. His knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of his console. For all his aggressive demeanor, Volkov possessed a fierce protective streak, especially for those who couldn't protect themselves. Petrova spoke, her voice earnest. Captain, there's a seldom invoked section of the UTF fleet mandate, Protocol 7, subsection Gamma. Preservation of unique sentient life threatened with imminent, unwarranted extinction. It allows for command discretion in situations where non-intervention would result in irreversible cultural or biological annihilation, provided the intervention does not catastrophically endanger Federation security. Thorne nodded slowly. He was well aware of Protocol 7. It was the conscience clause, rarely used, often debated by fleet strategists, but there nonetheless. And the risk to the Harbinger's technologies? Is significant, sir, Volkov stated plainly. But if we cripple their command and control quickly enough, if we hit them in a way they don't expect, we might be able to dictate the terms of engagement, or at least disengage before they can fully analyze our capabilities. Thorne looked from Petrova's impassioned hope to Volkov's grim realism. They were right. This was not a fight the Harbinger was designed for, not yet, but the alternative, to log the atrocity, file a report, and slink away into the nebula while an entire species was extinguished, was unthinkable. This was why humanity had striven for the stars, not just to explore, but to be something better. Helm, Thorne announced, his voice now resonating with quiet authority that filled the bridge. Lay in a course for Lyra Prime. Maximum sustained. Velocity. Engage experimental FTL drive once clear of the nebula's gravimetric interference. Commander Petrova, prepare a condensed cultural briefing on the Lumari. I want to know who we're fighting for. Commander Volkov, begin tactical simulations. Assume worst-case scenario. Full Kryll flotilla, no surrender. I want options for decapitation strikes, systemic disruption, and if necessary, a fighting withdrawal. Our operational order will be reconnaissance in force with a mandate for civilian protection under Protocol 7. A wave of quiet energy swept through the bridge crew. The unspoken tension that had gripped them since Petrova first isolated the signal transformed into focused determination. They had a purpose. Aye, Captain, the helm officer confirmed, his voice crisp. The Harbinger began a slow, majestic turn, its nose pointing towards the distant, troubled Lyra system. Lena, Thorne said, his voice softer, as Petrova began compiling the Lumari data. Thank you for catching that whisper. Most would have missed it. Petrova looked up, a faint, grateful smile touching her lips. Some things demand to be heard, Captain. As the Harbinger cleared the dense particle clouds of the Veil Nebula, its experimental FTL drive began to spool up. A sound, like rising thunder, contained within its hull. The stars outside elongated, then snapped into the mesmerizing tunnel of faster-than-light travel. The lone human ship, a vessel of untested, unseen power, was now a sliver of light streaking through the void, a council of the unseen rushing towards a dying world, carrying with it humanity's dangerous, unpredictable compassion. The journey to Lyra Prime was a silent, tense affair. The Harbinger's experimental FTL drive compressed subjective days into hours, each tick of the chronometer a stark reminder of the Lumari's dwindling chances. Captain Thorne spent much of the transit in the ship's tactical center, poring over Volkov's simulations and Petrova's increasingly harrowing translations of the Lumari data shard. Tales of a vibrant culture, exquisite art forms, and a deep, almost spiritual connection to the resonant frequencies of their planet, now being brutally silenced. When the Harbinger finally tore a hole in normal space at the edge of the Lyra system, the scene that greeted them was even worse than anticipated. Lyra Prime, once a jewel of blues and greens, was now a bruised, scarred orb. Vast swathes of its surface were obscured by roiling clouds of smoke and dust, the angry red glow of continent-spanning fires visible even from this distance. Debris, fields, the shattered remnants of Lumari orbital platforms and the few defense ships they'd possessed, glittered like malevolent frost in the light of Lyra's twin suns. And then, there were the Kryll. Volkov's tactical display lit up, like a hornet's nest. At least 30 Kryll vessels were in orbit, ranging from nimble destroyer-class ships forming a loose picket to heavier cruisers maintaining punishing bombardment trajectories. Dominating them all, positioned directly above the smoldering ruins of what Petrova identified as Ethelgard, the Lumari capital, was a Warlord-class command carrier. Warlord Skarn's flagship, the Ravager. Its silhouette was a jagged monstrosity of gun emplacements and armored plates, an emblem of Kryll brutality. They're thorough. I'll give them that, Volkov muttered, his voice tight with controlled anger. No signs of organized Lumari. Resistance. Sporadic energy bursts from the surface, likely just failing power systems or localized holdouts with no hope. Sensors confirm ongoing orbital strikes, Petrova added, her voice strained. Targeting patterns suggest they're systematically reducing all major population centers to rubble. Biosign readings are catastrophically low. Thorne absorbed the grim tableau, his expression unreadable. The sheer scale of the destruction was breathtaking in its horror. This wasn't conquest, it was extermination. Any sign they've detected? Us? Negative, Captain, the sensor officer replied. We're still outside their standard picket detection range for a vessel our size. Our FTL exit signature was minimal thanks to the new drive. On the command deck of the Ravager, Warlord Skarn surveyed the holographic projection of Lyra Prime with satisfaction. The resistance had been pathetic, the subjugation swift. Soon, the mining operations could begin in earnest. His multifaceted eyes flickered as Subcommander Vrock approached. Warlord, Vrock rasped. A single, unidentified vessel has just translated into the system's periphery. Mid-sized unknown configuration. Energy readings are unusual, but not indicative of significant threat. Skarn barely glanced at the new icon that appeared on the tactical display. A tiny, solitary blip on the far edge of the system map. A scavenger, perhaps? Or some local system patrol ship from a species foolish enough to wander this close to a hegemony operation? He made a dismissive gesture with one of his clawed appendages. Dispatch a destroyer squadron. Swat the fly. I don't want any interruptions to the pacification schedule. As you command, Warlord, Vrock said, bowing slightly before relaying the orders. A squadron of 3 Kryll destroyers, sleek, predatory vessels bristling with energy cannons, detached from the main fleet and altered course, accelerating towards the distant lone contact. To them, it was a routine task, a minor annoyance to be disposed of quickly. Deep within a network of subterranean caverns beneath the ruins of Ethelgard, Elder Thielen lay on a cold stone slab, the tremors from the orbital bombardment shaking the very rock around him. Of the thousands who had sought refuge there, only a few dozen Lumari remained, their feathers dull, their eyes wide with an ancient terror. Their intricate communication systems were long dead, their sensors barely functional. Yet one ancient jury-rigged device, a gravimetric anomaly detector, suddenly chimed. A faint, almost imperceptible chirp. Lyra, one of the young acolytes who had helped him activate the deep chanter, rushed to his side. Elder, the detector, a vessel has just entered the system. High-velocity FTL translation. Thielen's heart, already a fragile thing, fluttered. Hope, an emotion he thought had been extinguished, sparked faintly. Kryll reinforcements, he whispered, dread immediately warring with that tiny spark. Lyra frantically adjusted the crude controls. The signature, it's not Kryll, it's unknown. Singular, not part of their fleet. A single, unknown ship. What could one vessel do against the might of the Kryll Hegemony? Was it some other predator drawn by the scent of death? Or could it be an answer? Thielen closed his eyes, the image of the deep chanter's desperate, chaotic signal pulsing in his mind. He had cast their fate into the void, a message in a bottle thrown into an infinite ocean. Had someone, against all odds, found it? Aboard the Harbinger, Thorne watched the approaching Kryll destroyers on his main view screen. 3 of them accelerating with arrogant confidence. They've seen us, he said calmly, and they're sending a welcoming party. Commander Volkov, are we ready to dance? Volkov grinned, a flash of predatory anticipation in his eyes. The orchestra is tuned, Captain. Resonance Cascade torpedoes are primed. Phalanx drones are itching for some exercise. Lieutenant Commander Petrova, open a channel. Standard galactic intercept. No encryption. Thorne leaned forward slightly. Let's see if they're willing to talk before they shoot. Billy. Kryll destroyers, however, were not in a conversational mood. They continued their approach, weapons ports glowing with malignant energy. The time for talk, if there ever had been one, was over. The time for the Harbinger to unveil its true nature was at hand. They're not responding, Captain, Lena Petrova reported. her voice calm despite the 3 Kryll destroyers now rapidly closing the distance. On the main view screen, the enemy ships grew larger, their forms clearly defined, angular, heavily armed, and radiating aggressive intent. Energy spikes from their weapon systems indicated they were seconds from opening fire. "No surprise there," Jax Volkov commented, his hands hovering over his tactical controls. Kryll aren't known for their diplomatic finesse. "Raise shields, phalanx drones to defensive posture. Stand by resonance torpedoes," Captain Aris Thorne ordered, his voice even, cutting through the quiet tension on the bridge. "Let them make the first move. We're here to protect, not to conquer. But we will defend ourselves and the Lumari." The Kryll commander leading the destroyer squadron, a veteran named Karg, sneered as the lone, unidentified ship came into optimal firing range. Its design was unfamiliar, but its size was unimpressive. 1 ship against 3 of his. This would be over quickly. "All ships open fire. Gut this interloper," he snarled into his comm. A fusillade of crackling energy. Bolts erupted from the Kryll destroyers converging on the Harbinger. To Karg, it was a killing blow, but the Harbinger didn't explode. Instead, something extraordinary happened. Just as the enemy fire was about to impact, the space around the human ship shimmered. A dense cloud of small, impossibly agile drones, each no bigger than a human torso, materialized as if from nowhere. This was the Phalanx swarm. They moved with a fluid, coordinated grace that bordered on precognition, forming intricate, overlapping energy shields that pulsed with absorbed power. Kryll bolts slammed into these temporary barriers, dissipating in brilliant flashes of light, or were neatly deflected, sent careening harmlessly into the void. A few stray shots got through the primary screen, only to be met by the Harbinger's conventional shields, which flared but held. On the Ravager's command deck, Warlord Skarn, who had idly tuned his secondary monitor to the engagement, straightened, slightly. His multifaceted eyes narrowed. "Sub-Commander Vrock, what was that? Those defensive drones. Their reaction time is remarkable." Vrock, equally surprised, stammered, Unknown technology, Warlord. Scans are still attempting to resolve their energy signatures and maneuverability profiles." Aboard the lead Kryll destroyer, Karg stared in disbelief as his squadron's initial alpha strike was contemptuously brushed aside. "Impossible. Maintain fire. Concentrate on overwhelming those drones." But overwhelming the Phalanx swarm was proving to be a far more complex task than he imagined. The drones didn't just block, they adapted. Some actively projected targeted interference at the Kryll weapon emitters, causing shots to go wide. Others seemed to anticipate incoming fire, repositioning with blinding speed to reinforce threatened sectors of their defensive web. "Captain," Volkov reported, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. "Phalanx drones reporting 98% intercept, efficiency. Enemy fire is uncoordinated, focusing on brute force." "Understood, Commander," Thorne replied. "They've had their say. Now it's our turn. Launch resonance cascade torpedoes. Target their lead ship first. Let's give them something new to think about." Torpedo bays slid open along the Harbinger's sleek hull. With barely a whisper, a volley of resonance cascade torpedoes shot forth, not with the fiery blaze of conventional ordnance, but with a strange, ethereal glow. They streaked towards the Kryll destroyers, which, confident in their own shield strength, made only minor evasive maneuvers. The first torpedo struck Karg's ship. There was a dull thud, a flicker of its shields, and then nothing. Karg almost laughed. Pathetic. "Their weapons are as weak as their design," he crowed. Over the squadron comm dart, 2 more torpedoes hit his ship, with similar, seemingly negligible effect. Then a 4th. Suddenly, a low hum began to permeate Karg's destroyer. It started subtly, a vibration in the deck plates, then rapidly intensified. Warning lights flashed across his console as critical systems began to overload. The ship's structure groaned, a tortured sound that resonated through every compartment. The very metal of the hull seemed to be tearing itself apart from within. Karg stared in horror as a jagged crack appeared on his main view screen, spiderwebbing outwards. "What sorcery is this?" he shrieked, as his ship began to convulse violently. Power conduits exploded in showers of sparks. Bulkheads buckled. The Kryll warriors around him cried out in terror as the hum became a deafening, destructive roar. Aboard the Harbinger, Petrova watched her sensor readings with wide eyes. "Captain, the torpedoes are achieving sympathetic resonance. The target's hull integrity is collapsing. Its energy systems are cascading into critical failure. The lead Kryll destroyer, once a proud instrument of war, was now visibly shaking itself to pieces. Internal explosions rippled along its spine. With a final, agonizing groan, it broke in two, the sections tumbling lifelessly into space before its core reactor breached in a silent, brilliant flash. The remaining two Kryll destroyers, which had just begun to register impacts from their own allotment of resonance torpedoes, ceased firing. Their commanders watched in stunned silence as their squadron leader was so utterly and bizarrely annihilated. Panic began to set in. This was no known weapon. This was something alien, something terrifying. "Second destroyer is experiencing critical resonance failure, Captain," Volkov announced, his voice devoid of triumph, merely stating a fact. "Third is attempting to disengage." Indeed, the second destroyer was already starting to show the same fatal symptoms, its structure vibrating, its systems failing. The third, its commander clearly terrified, was turning to flee, engines flaring. Desperately. "Disable its engines, Commander," Thorne ordered. "No need for further destruction if they're running. But they don't leave this system to report until we're done." A final, precisely aimed resonance torpedo, calibrated now for a less destructive but equally effective impact, struck the fleeing destroyer's engine nacelles. The ship didn't explode, but its engines died in a shower of sparks, leaving it drifting helplessly. The second destroyer moments later succumbed to the cascade failure, its internal structure collapsing with a final, shuddering implosion, though less violent than the first. In the space of less than 5 minutes, a squadron of 3 Kryll destroyers had been systematically, almost contemptuously, dismantled. One obliterated, one structurally failed, one disabled and adrift. On the Ravager, an unnerving silence had fallen. Warlord Skarn stared at the tactical display, his mandibles slowly working. The tiny, insignificant blip had just methodically erased 3 of his warships using tactics and technology he had never encountered, never even conceived of. The arrogant confidence was gone from his multifaceted eyes, replaced by a dawning, chilling realization. This was no scavenger. This was a predator of an entirely different order. The silence on the Ravager's command deck was heavy, broken only by the faint, panicked clicks of Subcommander Vrock's mandibles. Warlord Skarn's multifaceted eyes burned with a furious, incredulous light as he stared at the tactical display. 3 of his destroyers gone, not just beaten but unmade by weapons that defied Kryll understanding. The casual ease with which the unknown vessel had dispatched them was an insult, a terrifying revelation. "Identify that ship." Skarn's voice was a low growl, like magma shifting beneath stone. "What species dares to deploy such weaponry? Against the Kryll Hegemony? Scans are inconclusive, Warlord," Vrock stammered, his usual composure shattered. "Their energy signatures are heavily masked. Hull composition is unfamiliar. No known registry matches their profile. They fight with demonic efficiency." "Demonic?" Skarn snarled, slamming a massive clawed fist onto his command console, making the lesser officers flinch. "They are an unknown, an anomaly, and anomalies are to be crushed." His rage was a palpable force, radiating outwards. He would not be humiliated by some upstart ghost ship. "All battle groups converge on the interloper. Annihilate it with concentrated firepower. I want that vessel reduced to drifting atoms." The Kryll fleet, a menacing collection of cruisers and heavy assault ships, responded to their warlord's command. Engines flared, and the orbital ballet of planetary subjugation transformed into a focused, vengeful swarm converging on the lone UTF Harbinger. On the human ship's view screen, the number of hostile contacts blossoming towards them was daunting. "Well, we certainly have their attention now," Jax Volkov observed, a tight, predatory smile on his face, though his eyes were intensely focused, cataloging the approaching threats. Looks like the whole welcoming committee is on its way, Captain. Indeed, Captain Aris Thorne replied, his calmness a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding on the tactical display. They're angry and they're coming in force. They'll expect us to either run or be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. We'll do neither. He knew the Harbinger, for all its advanced technology, couldn't withstand a sustained direct assault from so many capital ships. Attrition was not a game they could win. Commander Petrova, I need vulnerabilities. Focus on their command ships. Isolate their communication frequencies, sensor weaknesses, any structural anomalies our resonance scanners can pick up. Working on it, Captain, Lena Petrova responded, her fingers a blur across her console. The phalanx drones, having reformed around the Harbinger, shifted into a more aggressive posture, their energy signatures subtly changing. Commander Volkov, Thorne continued, we're going to use their numbers against them. I want hit-and-run strikes. Use the debris fields from their destroyed destroyers for cover. Prioritize their lead cruisers. We need to break their cohesion, sow confusion, and keep those resonance torpedoes learning. The more data they gather on Kryll hull structures, the more effective they become. With pleasure, Captain, Volkov confirmed, already inputting firing solutions. The Harbinger became a phantom. As the Kryll vanguard approached, expecting a static target or a panicked retreat, the human ship danced. It slid into the shimmering debris field of the recently destroyed Kryll ships, its black hull making it almost invisible against the star-dusted void. Then it would emerge with shocking speed, unleashing a precisely aimed volley of resonance cascade torpedoes at a designated Kryll cruiser, its phalanx drones flaring to intercept any immediate retaliatory fire before vanishing again into the swirling wreckage or behind a larger piece of debris. The Kryll, accustomed to more straightforward engagements, found themselves firing at ghosts. Their formations, designed for overwhelming broadsides, became tangled as they tried to pursue the elusive Harbinger. Target acquired. Kryll heavy cruiser Iron Maw, Petrova announced. Their primary command bridge has a slight energy shield, fluctuation on its dorsal side during weapon recharge cycles. Minimal window, but it's there. Volkov, you heard the lady, Thorne said. Painting the target, Volkov confirmed. The Harbinger surged from behind a shattered Kryll engine block. A ripple of torpedoes launched, not at the cruiser's main hull, but angled towards its command tower. The Iron Maw's shields absorbed the initial impacts, but one torpedo, its timing perfect, struck the dorsal bridge section just as its shields flickered. The effect was instantaneous. The cruiser's lights died, its weapon emplacements went silent, and it began to drift aimlessly, its command structure clearly decapitated. Warlord Skarn watched in mounting fury as another of his capital ships was neutralized with such contemptuous ease. His fleet was being picked apart, not by superior firepower in a conventional sense, but by superior tactics, speed, and a technology that seemed to operate on different physical principles. The resonance cascade was not just destroying his ships, it was destroying his crew's morale. Fear, a sensation Kryll warriors rarely felt when facing lesser species, was beginning to spread through his fleet. Focus fire, Skarn bellowed, into the fleet-wide command channel. Pin that cursed ship down, box it in. But pinning down the Harbinger was like trying to catch smoke in a net. Thorne anticipated their attempts to encircle him, using the Kryll's own aggressive maneuvers to create openings. Sir, Warlord Skarn's flagship, the Ravager, is moving to engage directly, Volkov warned, as the massive command carrier altered its trajectory, bringing its formidable forward batteries to bear. He's losing patience, Thorne observed, and making himself a target. Just as the Harbinger lined up for a daring strike against the Ravager itself, Petrova cried out, Captain! Multiple Kryll ships are breaking off. They're changing trajectory. They're targeting the planet. Full-scale bombardment all. Remaining population centers. On the main view screen, the tactical display confirmed it. A significant portion of the Kryll fleet, evidently acting on a furious, spiteful command from Skarn, had abandoned the fight with the Harbinger and was now vectoring towards Lyra Prime, weapons hot. If Skarn couldn't have the planet or defeat this infuriating ghost ship, he would ensure there was nothing left to save. Thorne's jaw tightened. The cold fury in his eyes was unmistakable. The Kryll warlord had just made the fight deeply personal. The lives of millions, perhaps billions of Lumari now hung on a razor's edge, hostage to a tyrant's rage. The Harbinger's mission had just shifted from surgical counterattack to desperate last-ditch defense. The tactical display on the Harbinger's bridge turned into a terrifying countdown. Dozens of Kryll warships, their forms silhouetted against the scarred face of Lyra Prime, were angling for their final brutal bombardment. Warlord Skarn, denied a quick victory over the human ship, was evidently content to salt the ashes of the Lumari civilization. Captain Aris Thorne's face was a mask of cold resolve. The lives of the remaining Lumari, huddled in their hidden shelters, now depended entirely on the actions of his ship, his crew. There was no time for intricate maneuvers, no room for surgical strikes. This would be a brutal, desperate stand. Commander Petrova. Thorne's voice cut through the tense silence, broadcast on all Kryll frequencies unencrypted. Message reads, Kryll Hegemony Fleet, this is UTF Harbinger. Cease all orbital bombardment of Lyra Prime and withdraw from this system immediately. Failure to comply will be interpreted as a declaration of intent to commit planetary genocide and will be met with total punitive retaliation. You have 1 standard minute to alter course. This is your only warning. Broadcasting now, Captain. Petrova confirmed, her voice tight. On the Ravager, Skarn heard the ultimatum. He laughed, a harsh grating sound. Total punitive retaliation? From one ship? The audacity. They bluff. Intensify the bombardment. Teach these primitives and their pathetic champion the price of defiance. The Kryll ships did not alter course. If anything, their descent towards optimal bombardment range accelerated. Thorne watched the timer on his command console tick down. 60 seconds, 50. The Kryll ships were now clearly visible as they prepared to unleash hell. They're not stopping, Captain, Volkov stated, his knuckles white on his console. I didn't expect them to, Thorne said, his voice dangerously quiet. The timer reached 0. Commander Volkov, all power to weapons and phalanx systems. Target every Kryll ship actively engaging in orbital bombardment. Priority to those closest to the surface. Unleash everything we have. No restraint. Burn them out of the sky. Aye, Captain. Volkov's response was a feral grin. Unleashing hell, the UTF Harbinger transformed. It was no longer a ghost, a dancer in the debris fields. It became a spearhead of incandescent fury. Racing towards Lyra Prime, it positioned itself between the descending Kryll armada and the planet's most densely populated remaining enclave, as identified by Petrova's hasty analysis of Elder Thielen's SOS data. The phalanx drones, now, numbering in the hundreds as reserve units deployed, formed a vast, shimmering shield above the targeted region, a desperate, glittering umbrella against the coming storm. Simultaneously, every weapon system aboard the Harbinger came alive. Resonance cascade torpedoes, now fully optimized from their encounters with the Kryll destroyers and cruisers, launched in continuous, overwhelming waves. They didn't just target individual ships. They were programmed to create cascading resonance fields, turning sections of the Kryll fleet against itself. Ships that had been designed with similar resonant frequencies for manufacturing efficiency suddenly found their proximity to their sister ships becoming a fatal weakness. Kryll energy blasts, intended to sterilize the Lumari cities below, slammed into the phalanx drone screen. The drones flared, some vaporizing under the sheer intensity, but others instantly moved to fill the gaps, their adaptive shielding working at maximum capacity. The sky above Lyra Prime became a maelstrom of dueling energies, a terrifying fireworks display with the fate of a civilization as its prize. The Harbinger itself, now at the heart of the storm, was a terrifying dervish of destruction. Its primary energy cannons, weapons held in reserve until this moment, carved molten lines through Kryll cruisers. Point defense lasers, usually for asteroid fragmentation, became surgical tools, slicing into exposed Kryll weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. The effect of the fully optimized resonance cascade torpedoes was horrific for the Kryll. One moment a battle line of heavy cruisers would be advancing, weapons blazing. The next, they would begin to shudder, then tear themselves apart from the inside out, their own structures becoming their doom. Panic, raw and unadulterated, ripped through the Kryll comm channels. This wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. The single human ship was not just fighting them. It was unmaking them, using weapons that seemed to obey no known physical laws they understood. Warlord Skarn, aboard the heavily damaged Ravager further out, watched his fleet disintegrate with a stunned, uncomprehending horror. The ships he had sent to destroy the planet were themselves being annihilated with a speed and ferocity that was beyond belief. The deathworlder ship was a whirlwind of destruction, its every shot precise, its defenses unbreakable, its weaponry a thing of nightmares. One of his last remaining command cruisers attempting to flee found itself caught in a resonance cascade. It didn't just explode. It buckled, twisted, and then imploded with a sickening crunch, its frame collapsing as if squeezed by an invisible giant. The sheer, terrifying effectiveness of the Harbinger, now fully unleashed, finally broke the Kryll. What remained of Skarn's, once proud flotilla, battered, terrified, and facing weapons they could neither comprehend nor counter, turned and fled. Those ships still capable of FTL jumps simply vanished, not even waiting for a coordinated retreat. The Warlord's flagship, the Ravager, its engines sputtering, its hull breached in multiple locations, limped away into the darkness, a broken testament to Kryll arrogance. Silence then descended upon the Lyra system, a profound, ringing silence, broken only by the crackle of residual energy discharges and the distant, fading rumble of the retreating Kryll. The UTF Harbinger, its hull scorched, its phalanx drone numbers depleted, but its core systems intact, floated alone in the ravaged orbit of Lyra Prime. Below, the planet was scarred, wounded, but the systematic annihilation had been stopped. "Status report," Thorne said, his voice hoarse but steady. "Multiple Kryll ships destroyed or rendered. Inoperable, Captain," Volkov reported, his usual bravado replaced by a weary awe. "The rest are in full retreat. No hostile contacts remain in the system. The Lumari enclave we shielded is mostly intact, sir," Petrova added, a tremor of emotion in her voice. "Sensors are picking up faint life signs, more than I dared hope." A weak signal then reached the Harbinger. It was audio, distorted but recognizable as the Lumari language. Petrova quickly translated. "Captain, it's Elder Thielen," he says. We don't know who you are, or from what star you came, but you are the echo of a song we thought had died. You are the saviors of Lyra Prime, the Lumari. Owe you a debt that can never be repaid. Thank you. Thank you." Petrova's eyes were shining. Thorne leaned back in his chair, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. He looked at his bridge crew, tired, strained, but alive and victorious. They had faced overwhelming odds and, through courage, ingenuity, and a touch of righteous fury, had prevailed. "Helm," he said softly, "maintain orbit. Lieutenant Commander Petrova, open a secure channel to Sector Command. Inform them that the shakedown cruise for the UTF Harbinger is complete. All experimental systems performed, above expectations. Also inform them that Lyra Prime is now under the provisional protection of the United Terran Federation, pending formal diplomatic engagement with the Lumari survivors. And send them our sensor logs of the Kryll engagement. It's time the rest of the galaxy understood who we are. The story of the Battle of Lyra Prime, of the lone human deathworlder ship that had appeared from nowhere to break an entire Kryll invasion fleet, would become known as the Harbinger's Echo. It would be a tale told in hushed, awestruck tones, in the seedy spacer bars of the Outer Rim, and in the grand halls of the Galactic Concord. It would be a warning to those who preyed on the weak, and a beacon of improbable hope to those in despair. Humanity, the often underestimated, sometimes dismissed latecomers to the galactic stage, had shown their true colors, and those colors, as the Kryll Hegemony had learned to their catastrophic cost, were not just of survival, but of fierce, unwavering, and utterly dangerous compassion. The echoes of that defiance would resonate for a long, long time.